Hey YouTube, it's your girl Chic from Chic Say What. I am coming on tonight, this Friday night, to discuss the wonderful state of California, in particular, the city of Los Angeles. I want to talk about the crime rate there. Many of us, when we think of California, in particular, Los Angeles, high crime, that is a thought that comes to us. Me personally, I am from California. I'm from Northern California, what often you may hear referred to as the Bay Area. I am from that part of California. So it's a very large state. So a lot of times when we hear about like crime in California, one's thoughts is going to go to Los Angeles, or maybe if you do think about the Bay Area, you might think of Oakland, Richmond, maybe even San Francisco. But tonight I want to talk about Los Angeles. Recently, an LAPD detective compared Los Angeles to the Purge. Remember that movie? They had maybe like, I think, a couple of versions of, or I guess they have sequels to it. I remember seeing it some years back, but he compared it to the Purge. If any of you are familiar with that movie, if you're not, look that movie up so you'll kind of get an idea of what that means when a police officer compares the city of Los Angeles to the Purge due to the rise in crime. That is definitely not a good thing. It's very scary. So when I heard that, this officer had compared Los Angeles to the Purge, it made me clutch my invisible pearls because I've seen that movie. I've seen the different I guess versions of it that they've come out with, and it's a rather scary movie because it's just about basically knocking people off within a short window of time. So I wanted to come on here and talk about that, and if anyone happens to catch this live, please chime in because I'd like to hear your thoughts pertaining to what's going on in Los Angeles. The detective comparing what's going on, the city of Los Angeles to the movie The Purge. But yes, I just want to talk about it. If you do happen to catch the playback, drop a comment because it's very scary. And when you're hearing a police officer say, "Hey, find somewhere else to go other than coming to the city of Los Angeles," like you can't ignore that. You kind of gotta really take that in and really think about what it is that he's saying. I remember as a child being from Northern California. So I grew up, in the 80s, 90s. So I'm 80s baby, but I remember as I said, I'm from Northern California, the Bay Area. So it's such a large state. So as a child, we would pack up in the car and travel to Los Angeles for vacation. So, you have your Disney World down there, Universal Studios, and we would often go shopping down there. And during that time, gang life was just like a big thing. So my mom, she would be mindful of like the type of clothes that we would wear, the colors. She would often dress us girls in like your fluorescent colors, and just and then we get on the road and we travel down there, never had any issues or anything. But ever since I could remember, safety going to Los Angeles has been a concern. And right now, it's still a concern. So fast forward 40 plus years later, like safety is still a concern going to Los Angeles. So the question is why? So I have some articles and things I want to share that's just going to highlight or talk about some things that are a focus for that area. There's some political things that are coming up, and when we think about crime, areas that have high crime rates in comparison to areas that have low crime rates, how often does politics play a part in that? Do we see places with high crime rates? What does the homeless rate, the homeless rate look like in those areas? Because what they say, desperate times calls for desperate measures. So we all know, most people, another fun fact about Los Angeles, and I use that word fun loosely, is that it has a high number of homelessness there. Like that's a big problem there. And it's big in San Francisco, and it's even, I live in Metro Atlanta, Georgia. So within Atlanta, it's very big as well. And I recently visited Nashville, Tennessee for the first time. And the thing that stood out to me about, the city of Nashville is their home. I didn't see very many people that looked to be homeless. The city looked very clean. I probably can count on one hand how many people I saw that looked as though they may have been homeless. And it just had made me wonder what the difference is, for their city and how they tackle or deal with homelessness in comparison to Georgia, Atlanta in particular, how they deal with homelessness. And I also took note of, while in that city, the great city of Nashville, because I found the city to be very beautiful. My niece is attending TSU there. So me and the family took a little road trip up there during the homecoming weekend. And me and my husband we really liked Nashville. We just thought it looked so nice and clean. And I remember as we were exploring the city by car, because we were there just for, it's a quick trip, weekend trip. So we just explored through in the car with the kids. But I remember seeing signs talking about homelessness and the programs and the supports that they had for homelessness. So it made me wonder, wow, well, could that be why this city looks so clean and put together? Because they have their homeless situation under control. They have programs and things in place to help the people who are in need. So, that was just something I wanted to throw out there as we talk about, homelessness and it being a real thing, because that's a problem across many major cities across our country. And I happen to live in, one of your top, major cities or in the surrounding area, Atlanta, Georgia. Anytime you hear talks of like major cities come uh, and under discussion, Atlanta, oftentimes for whatever it may be, their name will come up. So I can speak to just my own experience and what I see living here in Georgia. So that was what I noticed in Tennessee. And just because of what I said, I noticed about the city of Tennessee, I would say that even, and I can probably dive into the research, I would guess that their crime rate for Nashville is much lower than like your cities that have a really major problem with homelessness. So that's just food for thought I want to throw out there. But let's just get into the discussion pertaining to Los Angeles and the LAPD detective comparing it to the Purge. So I want to share my screen and show this interview with this detective. So this is foxla.com. So it reads, LAPD detective compares Los Angeles to the Purge due to rise in crime. So this was published on December 8th, 2021. So this is recent. So I'll go ahead and play this video.
Well, yeah, first we have to look, how did we get here? The ACLU advocated for Proposition 47, which changed the sentencing guidelines. So right now, you can literally go out, do whatever you want, commit crimes, and you'll be out faster than the officers can finish the report, and that's a fact. We're wondering, how many times does somebody have to be arrested here in LA before they stay in jail? It's sad to say, but it's almost safer to hang out with Alec Baldwin on a movie set than to go shopping in Los Angeles right now. That's how crazy it is. It is so violent. We're telling people don't visit because we don't think we can keep you safe right now. And that's just sad to say. Well, you'd have to start with the governor. Gavin Newsom. He's advocated with ACLU for Proposition 47 as well as George Gascon, who authored that bill. And here's an interesting twist too. The CEO to Netflix gave $3 million to fight the recall campaign on Governor Gavin Newsom, and that's the son-in-law of Jacqueline Avant, who was murdered by somebody who got out of jail who should have been in jail. So first of all, you got to clean up from the top. Gavin Newsom needs to be gone. We need to work on changing these laws back to make it tougher on crime. We need to get rid of these so-called progressive district attorneys. They are advocating for the criminals. It's almost like it's shame on you if you're a victim. It's like it's your fault. That's the way they see it. So there's a lot of cleaning up to do, but we need to take back the streets. And to be honest with you, it shouldn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I think we should all want to feel safe in your home, and we should be tough on crime. And that's where it starts. We have to start from the top and clean house all the way down. Well, AOC, is she living with her head buried in the sand? It's ridiculous. All you have to do is just turn on, any news channel. There's even the more liberal ones are showing some of the stuff. And they're not showing all of it, but they are. It's like, this AOC experiment was nice. Now it's time for her to go back to bartending and doing what she does best, because she's definitely not a lawmaker and she doesn't keep the citizens safe. And there's people like her and the rest of the squad who are just clueless on what's going on in the United States. There's rampant crime everywhere. And in fact, Los Angeles is like the movie Purge, but instead of 24 hours to commit your crime, they have 365 days to go out and commit their crimes. And that's how it is right now in Los Angeles and in San Francisco. Well, they call having bail making it a criminal offense to be poor, is what they're saying. They call it racist. Do you see people stopping at the grocery store and doing smash and grabs, grabbing milk, meat, cheese, and everything? No. What you're seeing is they're going and getting Rolex watches. They're smashing jewelry stores. They're going into Louis Vuitton stores. And these so-called celebrities and other politicians that are so far on the left, they don't want to admit they were wrong. And so they keep their head buried in the sand. But here's the interesting thing. But everybody wants to be a liberal until they get robbed or shot. And you see how quick they change their tune. And that's what it's going to come down to. I just want to say, the ACLU, they're the ones, they're the partner in crime for the suspects. And what we did is we created a national database. It's aclu-watch.com. You go there, you click on your state, and you'll see exactly how the ACLU is helping the criminals succeed and how to stay out in the streets and commit crimes.
So there you have it. That's coming from
council made up of about 40 organizations recommends the state.
So that's coming from an LAPD detective who sees firsthand, what's going on the streets. He brought up AOC was at Alexandria. She's a politician out of New York. And you may have to look into seeing what she's saying about some things, because he brought up her name and he said she need to go back to bartending. So let's look at these stats for the crime rate for Los Angeles. So this is NBC LosAngeles.com. So it says LA robberies 12.7% lower compared to 2019, but last week reached 2021 high. So let's see what it's showing. This is a news clip. Let's turn it around.
Marjorie wakes up in the middle of the night to find this. Can you see it there? The inside of her car destroyed. And neighbors told her that a couple of bear cubs somehow managed to get inside, ripped up the seats, and
let's see. Okay. Let's try this again. Let's turn the volume up.
must be done.
The head of LA's police commission urging the police chief, the mayor, and others to do a lot more to stop this year's seemingly uncontrollable rise in crime.
The lawlessness that we are experiencing is simply unacceptable. The average citizen right now is concerned about going out of their home simply for holiday shopping.
He's talking about the near 50% increase in murders over the last 2 years, the rise in follow home and street robberies in the last few months, and the near daily reports of smash and grab mobs.
And we've seen how those criminals who were caught are back on the street because of the current catch and release policy.
Crime data shows it's not just perception. The LAPD says it recorded the most robberies in the last week than in any other week this year. 19 people were shot over the last weekend alone.
We think they're chronic offenders. We think that some of these more serious series are individuals that are repeating over and over.
LAPD Chief Moore says illegally possessed guns continue to be a major factor driving the violence, and he says many of the people caught with illegal guns are released immediately with no bail.
When our officers speak with these individuals carrying these guns and committing these crimes, they recurrently hear a very nonchalant attitude about a lack of consequences.
LAPD arrest data obtained by the I-Team shows of the 4,400 illegal weapons arrests so far this year, like these shared by officers on social media, criminal charges are only filed about half the time.
Chronic individuals are taking advantage of that, and that is expanding. It's like a virus. It does spread to a contagion effect to others who feel like there's a lack of consequences, and I'm going to engage in this with little regard.
Says he met with LA County DA George Gascon last week and says Gascon gave his full commitment to prosecute those caught with illegal guns in LA. Gascon has banned the use of some sentencing enhancements for people who are caught committing crimes while armed, but his office said today prosecutors are able to use one particular type enhancement with supervisor approval in violent incidents like robberies and murders. Reporting live, I'm investigative reporter Eric Leonard, NBC4 News. Back to you.
So basically what we're hearing is that just as quick as these perpetrators are taken into custody, they're let back go and put back out on the streets just due to a law that's in place out there. Like they don't even have to have a bail, what's been said, like they just get let back go. So it's like a vicious cycle. Let's read what this article says. While robberies overall have decreased by 12.7% this year compared to 2019, last week had the highest number of robberies for the entire year, with about 200 reported. Los Angeles Police Chief Michael Moore said on Tuesday. The vast majority of the 200 robberies reported last week were street robberies, Moore added. We've seen in September, October, and November instances of robberies increase, particularly the percentages of those robberies being committed by individuals with handguns or firearms, Moore said. Overall, robberies are up 4.7% compared to 2020, but Moore indicated that number could be considered something of an anomaly. Now we still are 12.7% fewer robberies overall in the city than we did from 2 years ago, recognizing that the COVID years, for lack of better term, last year was a bit of an outlier on the number of factors, Moore said. Moore also said the department expects to have recovered 9,000 firearms in 2021 by the end of the year, which will be a significant number higher than any of our previous years in recent memory. That's a lot of firearms. Over the last year, violent crime in Los Angeles has increased by 6.3%, Moore said, representing an additional 1,665 violent crimes. Homicides have risen from 317 last year to 361 during the same period this year. And over a 2-year period, homicides have increased by 49.2%. 50% in 2 years. Now that's crazy. Aggravated assaults have increased 8% this year compared to last year and 16.4% over a 2-year period. It's like it's doubling. This is a city of 4 million in the region of 10 million. So the vastness of it, people need to recognize that the vast majority of Angeles Angelos are safe, but they need to exercise good preventative measures. Noting a series of smash and grab robberies and follow home robberies that have been reported in recent weeks in Los Angeles. Moore said people should be careful wearing expensive jewelry, driving expensive vehicles, and leaving high in establishments because people may be targeting them for robberies. Well, that's out there where Los Angeles is, where Hollywood is. So I imagine there's a good number of people who are wearing expensive jewelry, driving expensive vehicles, and leaving high-end establishments. Recently, and I'll get into it, there was a senior woman, 81. She was of, basically rich. She was killed during a robbery in her home. I'll share that because I remember hearing about it, but I didn't research the story. So we can get into that together. I believe her daughter is married to the CEO of Netflix. So let's get into this story. This is the LATimes.com. Brutal brazen crime shake LA, leaving city at a crossroads. Okay, so it says crews of burglars publicly smashing their way into Los Angeles' most exclusive stores, robbers following their victims, including a star of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and a BET host, to their residences. And this week, the fatal shooting of 81-year-old Jacqueline Avant, an admired philanthropist and wife of music legend Clarence Avant, in her Beverly Hills home. So their daughter, Jacqueline and Clarence, their daughter is married to the CEO of Netflix. And prior to Jacqueline's, her death, I had learned that, and how I came to learn that they were the parents of the wife of the CEO of Netflix, because there was a YouTuber who profiles like interracial couples and stuff. And they pointed out that the CEO of Netflix was married to a Black woman. And when I started researching that Black woman, that's how I learned who her parents were. And that had to have been maybe no more than about 2 weeks, couple of weeks prior to, the murder of Jacqueline Avant. So it's just crazy how I kind of just learned of this woman um, by way of her daughter and son-in-law. And now she's no longer with us for um, foolishness, for a heinous crime. So it says after 2 years of rising violent crimes in Los Angeles, these incidents have sparked a national conversation and led to local concern about both the crimes themselves and where the outrage over the violence will lead. The fact that this has happened, her being shot and killed in her own home after giving, sharing, and caring for 81 years, has shaken the laws of the universe, declared Oprah Winfrey, expressing her grief over Avant's killing to her 43 million Twitter followers. The world is upside down. So this is the beautiful Jacqueline Avant and her husband, Clarence Avant. The article goes on to say, while overall city crime rates remain far below records set during the notorious gang wars of the 1990s, violent crime has jumped sharply in LA, and it has in other cities. Much of the violence has occurred in poor communities and among vulnerable populations, such as the homeless, and receives little attention. As I started this live, from what I've heard, and it makes sense to me, when there's areas where there's a high percentage of homelessness, crime is going to come, because as I said, desperate times calls for desperate measures, and people who don't have they're going to go and get. So it's like a domino effect when you address your homeless situation, when you address your job market situation, like it's going to impact, your crime numbers. Um, and that makes sense as to why, say, outside of the city in your suburb areas, you're going to have your crime numbers are going to typically be much lower, because the people are, the people have more. They're in a higher social class. So they're not operating from a desperate type mindset. Uh, this article also goes on to say, however, since the start of the pandemic and more rapidly in recent months, crime has crept up in wealthier enclaves and thrust its way to the center of public discourse in LA against a backdrop of COVID-19 and angst involving political perceptions of that role of police and prosecutors should play in society, and now a holiday season upon which brick and mortar retailers are relying to stay afloat. Some wonder if this could be a turning point for California, which for decades have been at the center of the movement for criminal justice reform, rolling back tough sentencing laws and reducing prison populations. So my question is letting out, these criminals so quickly, are we dealing with a situation of, okay, well, we have to let them out because we don't have enough space to hold everyone. So we have to pick and choose who we're going to detain. So are they down, with that being said, are they downplaying, or the state of California, in particular Los Angeles, are they downplaying the crimes? Well, this person didn't murder someone, so we're going to go ahead and let them back out on the street. Like that's what it comes down to. And then if that is their mindset, then they need to address the matters, as I talked about with those situations when I talked about homelessness, job. Right. First of all, anybody who knows anything knows that California, in particular Los Angeles, it's an expensive place to live. Like, it is. I would say probably Los Angeles would be more expensive to live than even Northern California. I've never lived in like the southern parts of California, but I know Northern California is very expensive. I left at a young age. I was like 14 when I moved away. My mother got a job transfer that brought us to Georgia, so that's how I actually left the state of California. So a lot of times when you're living in it, you don't really realize the severity of a situation, because all you know is what you know. So for example, me moving away from California and moving just to the, to the South, like clear across the country, and growing up and gaining this sense of, money, cost of living, all of that, I got to see like the big difference between where I live here, in Georgia versus where I moved from in California. And it's the cost, it's astronomical, like how much it costs to live in the state of California. So that part right there, I would imagine, can contribute also to the violence, the crime that's going on there. People are just doing what they feel is necessary in order to survive. Now, do I agree with what they're doing? No, of course not. But I feel like that's exactly what's happening. People are choosing to go the route of crime in order to get what they need, to get the items that they feel like, okay, they can go and sell to get money. So from a political standpoint, I think that the state of California should look at the cost of living and how much it costs to live out there. They need to dig deep into like the whole affordable housing situation, the homeless rates. Look at, jobs. What type of jobs are there? How can they um, transition people who are homeless back into the workforce? Things like that, versus just saying, oh, okay, well, we don't have enough space in our jails or our prisons for everyone. So people who commit crime, we'll just go ahead and, let them out. And it's just like it's like a, what do you call that? Like a vicious cycle where they're cycling in and they're cycling out. Like they're so used to like, oh, I'll go hit this lick. If they pick me up, I'll be out in like 24 hours. They already got something else lined up to do soon as they step foot, out the precinct. So it's just crazy to where, they already see how the system is flawed. So that's why they are able to, why they're doing what they're doing. Again, everything kind of leads back to politics, to where you have to look at the people who are in control, who are making these decisions. That's why it's important when it comes to who we're voting into our into the the political seats, things like that, like your local DAs, your governors, your mayors, your local constituents, like everything, like all of it makes a difference. You have to gain an understanding of what their policies are, because if you choose to downplay any of that and overlook it, it's going to come back to bite you. And you'll see it play out with situations like these, when you see that policies are in place that just let criminals just do what they do and just get back on the streets. Let's see. This article also goes on to say polls in 2020 show that California voters largely support many of these measures, and both San Francisco and Los Angeles have elected district attorneys with strong reform agendas. However, those concerned about crime and those who believe liberal policies have contributed to its rise have grown more vocal. It is a discourse defined by glaring differences of opinion and at times yawning disconnect between the perception of local crime and the reality on the ground. Dominic DeLuca, the owner of the Brooklyn Project skateboard shop on Melrose Avenue, a commercial corridor that has seen burglaries and robberies spike sharply in recent months, said things have gotten so bad that he carries a gun to work and desperately wants ramped up enforcement. Quote, I have never seen anything like it, he said. In the last 2 years, I have been broken into 3 times. Listen, at the Thursday press conference, Mayor Eric Garcetti and Los Angeles Police Department Chief Michael Moore said more offenders should be locked up and questioned pandemic-related policies that have allowed many nonviolent arrestees to be released without bail. Moore said arrests had been made in several high-profile smash and grab burglaries, but lamented that the suspects had all been released pending trial. Garcetti said warehousing criminals in jails without rehabilitating them is not the solution, but neither is setting the street to repeat offenders. Right, that part, like that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon, whose progressive policies around the prosecution and sentencing many blame for the uptick in crime, was notably absent at the press conference, but said through his office that he is working closely with law enforcement partners to hold perpetrators accountable for such brazen crimes. The heightened rhetoric marks a departure from language shared by many of the same officials just last year after George Floyd's murder by the Minneapolis police officer. This has set off alarms among activists who led protests want to see progressive justice measures enacted and hear echoes of past errors when they believe the overhyping of crime led to over-policing and excessive incarceration. They're trying to move us backwards, said Melina Abdullah, a co-founder of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. We don't want to move backward. We want to move forward. Abdullah called Avant's killing horrific and appalling and said Black Lives Matter mourns with her family. But she said officials must not be allowed to use Avant's death or recent property crime to push for more policing, cash bail, or other high, tough on crime measures that she said have been proved not to work. Quote, we need to think about what kind of economic desperation actually creates property crime, and how do we get people out of that state, Abdullah said. How do we create livable wage jobs? How do we create affordable housing? Those are the things, that I was talking about. It's like a domino effect. You have to address those things, because when you address those things, then it's going to kind of impact your crime rate. So she is right when she talks about addressing job wages, because what good is having minimum wage jobs set at $15 an hour when someone who works that job can't afford housing on that? It doesn't make sense. What they say, the math ain't mathing. It has to add up. It has to make sense that the people make the money to accompany the costs to sustain in that area, in that environment. Otherwise, you're going to continue to see what we're seeing, these high crime rates. Let's try to look at the minimum wage for Los Angeles. Let's see what that's looking like. Like I said, I know, I'm familiar with California, and it's super expensive to live out there. So you can't be playing around trying to offer somebody anything for $15 an hour. Like, no. Less than $20 an hour, you can forget it. Really, $20 an hour, you can't even afford to live out there. But let's see what this is saying pertaining to minimum wage. Okay, so let me share my screen to show what I've just looked up pertaining to minimum wage. Let's see, California minimum wage. So this is California's 2021 minimum wage increase to impact exempt and non-exempt employees. So 2021 state minimum wage law. January 1st, 2021, California state wage minimum will increase to $14 per hour for employers with 26 or more employees, and $13 per hour for employers with 25 or fewer employees. But note, as described below, some local ordinances have higher minimum wage than the state law, and some local ordinances eliminate any distinction in minimum wage based on employer size. So the latest increase will move California one step closer to its goal of $15 per hour minimum wage. In 2016, California enacted legislation setting forth gradual increases in the minimum wage until 2023. A minimum wage in California will continue to rise each year on a statewide basis until it reaches $15 an hour. That's still not a lot. Like, I live in California, is like way more expensive than Georgia. And even here in Georgia, you can barely, live on your own making $15 an hour someplace. With the way the cost of living is going, that's even a struggle. So I know good and well, living in California, you can hang that up on trying to live someplace without probably at least 5 other adults in that same, housing, paying rent to so everybody can kind of put their coins together to have a roof over their head month over month. Like it's still not enough. It doesn't make sense. It's still not enough. So it goes on to say, in addition to California's statewide minimum wage increase, many cities and counties have enacted their own minimum wage ordinances that exceed state requirements. If a local minimum wage rate is more generous to employees than the state minimum wage rate, employers must comply with the local law. The charter law show changes to the local minimum wage rates throughout California set to take effect January 1st, 2021 and July 1st, 2021. So these are the different areas. Alameda, $15 an hour. Berkeley, 16. So that's the Bay Area, Berkeley, Emeryville, Fremont. So Los Angeles, and they have the minimum wage lower than the cities that are in Northern California, the Bay Area. Malibu, $15 an hour, like 16. It's not enough. No wonder why homeless rates, homelessness is what it is. Like these people can't afford to live off of these rates. It's not enough, like period. It's just not. So it definitely makes sense why the homelessness is an issue in San Francisco and Los Angeles, California, period. Like it makes sense. So it says effective January 1st, 2021, minimum salary threshold for these exemptions is as follows: $58,240 per year or $1,120 per week for employers of 26 or more employees. So no, unfortunately, living in California and living, especially in the Los Angeles area, 58,000 a year, that's not enough to really survive. And then not to include it's probably not even enough you by yourself. Like you might can even rough it out but when you have children, like a lot of people do within their home, that's not enough money to sustain you in the great state of California. It is what it is. So until they address, like the woman said, in that article, until they address that situation pertaining to the homelessness, that crime is going to look the way it's going to look. And as of right now, they're not really keeping the people locked up in jail behind those crimes due to standing laws. So California will continue to look like the Purge, or at least Los Angeles will, unfortunately. May the Lord be with everyone, all the residents there who are living on the up and up. Yeah, it is what it is. So yes, I won't keep this live too long. I just want to come out here and just bring this to you all. It's going down in Los Angeles. Be safe. California, I always call California home. It's where I'm from. I love California, but I am not in denial about the reality of what's, the seriousness, this whole safety concern. If any of you are familiar with Tariq Nasheed, who's the creator of the movies Hidden Color and Buck Breaking, he has a museum that he was going to open up down there, I think on Crenshaw. But I've recently heard that he may be considering moving the location to Atlanta. I definitely feel like it does make more sense to have the museum here in Atlanta versus Los Angeles, because I don't, like I said, California, in particular, Los Angeles, Crenshaw area, like ever since the 90s, a lot of people like myself has been like on edge about visiting that location. So I really didn't feel like the museum would get the type of traction it could had it been in like another location like DC or Atlanta or someplace in the South. So if he is moving it to Atlanta, I definitely think that is a great move, and it'll have more visibility. More people will feel comfortable about going to check it out, because Atlanta, it's already known as being, a city where there's a lot of Black history in it. So we have, the African American Museum. Like, we have um, a lot of places to go and tour, centered around just Black culture here in Atlanta. So to have the museum, the African American Museum, not quite sure what he's naming the museum, but to have that museum here near where a lot of our other historical tourist places are, like, I think it makes sense. So hopefully that is true. I was listening to someone's live earlier, and someone on there said that he was talking about moving it to Atlanta. So hopefully that's true, because I think it would do well, and I would definitely, check it out, being that it was here in Atlanta. But when I learned that it was going to be in Los Angeles, I'm like, well, I guess I won't be seeing that, because it just wasn't going to be an option for me to take a flight all the way to Los Angeles, Crenshaw, to go to that museum. Like, no. I think a lot of people was kind of thinking that way, even though they supported the whole idea of him having the museum. They just probably didn't think they would probably end up checking it out just because of its location. So, but yes, please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when I go live. Hit the like button, helps with the algorithm. But definitely subscribe if you like the content that I put out here. I'm just a smaller growing YouTuber, but I just come on here to just get out the messages that I feel like that are important for the people, important for our people, or but I just want to keep you in the know. So whether it be celebrity news or just what's going on in the world, I just want to just keep the people informed. So as I inform myself on things that's going on, I want to inform you, those of you who are listening. So if you caught the live, I thank you for joining. If you catch the playback, I thank you also for visiting my channel. So until the next broadcast, peace.